The night the midwinter express left Budapest, the sky was the color of pewter, and the Danube glimmered like a dull knife under a rising fog. I had booked my compartment in the second-class sleeper simply to cross the Alps in style, to feel the quiet percussion of wheels while I scribbled notes for my monograph on medieval funerary rites. Instead, I found myself seated in the gold-leaf dining saloon with a company of strangers whose names still echo in my skull. Lord Whitcomb, that sallow relic of the Great War. Madame Roussel, perfume magnate and whispered poisoner. Father Donnelly, whose Roman collar looked too white for any earthbound clergy. The American twins, Riley and June Parker. Ventriloquist by trade, and, presiding over us all with a conductor's watchful gaze, Mr. Scurlock, the line's senior purser. The locomotive itself, an experimental Titan, 606 nicknamed the Iron Leviathan, had been extolled in newspapers as the swiftest engine in Europe. Its riveted flanks bore bas-reliefs of roaring lions, and its headlamp was ringed by iron petals like some cyclopean sunflower. Before we departed, I noticed the yard workers crossing themselves whenever they neared the front, as though the machine exhaled a whiff of blasphemy. None of us slept the first night. Storm clouds pursued us across the Hungarian plain, thundering on the roof with the fury of cavalry charges. At dawn, the conductor announced an unscheduled halt. Drifting snow had swallowed the track near the Slovakian frontier. We would wait, he said, for a plow engine coming from Vienna. In the meantime, the boilers hissed like chained serpents, and the train sat motionless amid a wilderness of white ridges and black pine. By noon, the wind stalled, and a baleful stillness descended. It was then that something, I cannot name it except to say no bird or mammal could make so thick a silence settled over the railway cut. Each of us felt it, a hush that pressed the lungs flat and magnified the faintest creak of varnished paneling. I caught Madame Roussel studying the brass light fixtures as though they might leer or blink. At 3 o'clock the first carriage vanished. Lord Whitcomb and I were sharing chess in the smoking lounge. He had just advanced his queen when the lamps flickered. A single jolt shuddered through the floor, as if the engine had tugged at its chain. Then came a drawn-out grinding, metal sliding over metal far ahead. The vibration quivered through the mahogany walls and died in our boots. Moments later, Scurlock burst in, cheeks blanched. The tug of music cooled the smoky air. Bob rolled onto his back and watched as the Scurlock burst in, cheeks blanched. Carriage 1 is gone, he said, simply gone. We followed him into the vestibule. Where the coupling should have joined the locomotive to the forward Pullman, there gaped a sawed-off portal exposed to swirling snow. Not a splinter, not a snapped bolt, littered the track. It was as though the train had been bitten cleanly in two. Beyond, an expanse of disturbed snow showed no extraneous footprints. In the vacant space glimmered the rails, half hidden by drifts, rails that led into a tunnel of white gloom where engine and lost carriage had once been. Every soul who had slept in carriage 124 passengers, 6 stewards had vanished with it. Their luggage remained in the baggage car farther back, pieces locked and labeled. Their absence made those mute trunks seem suddenly shrunken and obscene. Father Donnelly led a search party 20 meters up track, calling out blessings against avalanche spirits. The rails ended abruptly beneath a slow slide of powder, but there was no sign of splintered wood or the Iron Leviathan. It was as if the snow had erased them from the chronology of the world. When dusk thickened, Scurlock ordered everyone into the rear dining saloon. A chamber of mirrors and crystal chandeliers, a fire was built in the grate normally reserved for first-class soirees. We clustered around it like penitents, illuminations sliding over worried brows. Lord Whitcomb attempted rationality. A coupling failure. The forward carriage ran ahead downhill, perhaps derailed in the valley. Madame Roussel's voice, laced with bergamot, was disdainful. Ran where, my lord? You saw no downhill grade, only a prison of snow. Father Donnelly murmured a psalm about chariots and horses being thrown into the sea. His voice cracked on the final syllable, making the flame gutter as though breath bridged worlds. During our debate, an odd thumping traveled the length of the ceiling. Mrs. Parker Riley's elder by 12 minutes looked up and whispered, "Someone in the ventilator shafts." Her brother's ventriloquist talent made the remark seem to float from behind my left ear, and I shivered. Scurlock climbed a brass ladder to inspect the vents. He reported nothing but frost-stiff louvers. Yet the thumping persisted at intervals through the night, roving from coach to coach like a predator sniffing locked doors. Snow buried the undercarriage by morning, welding wheels to track. Telegraph poles draped in ice stood mute. Every wire had snapped under the storm's weight. Scurlock, Lord Whitcomb, and I attempted to hike 500 yards to a signal hut we'd glimpsed before dusk. Each step sank thigh-deep. A blizzard's ragged afterbirth of wind tore at our eyes. We did not reach the hut. We did, however, notice something neither of the night searchers had seen. On the boiler casing of the stranded dining coach, just above the brake wheel, lay an imprint resembling the whorl of a gigantic fingerprint pressed into frost. The ridges spanned a yard from tip to tip. I pressed my palm against one trough and traced its spiral curve. My skin crawled as though I touched living flesh, not ice. Back inside, I shared my finding. No one laughed. It was Lord Whitcomb who whispered what all of us thought. What if the machine itself removed the carriage? What if it feeds one coach a course, each course served in darkness? That night, Carriage 2 disappeared. We were awake to feel it go. First the unnerving stillness, then a tug at the spinal cord of the train, followed by negative space. An absence so wide you could feel the air rush to fill it. The vanishing tore away Father Donnelly and 4 other guests who had barricaded themselves behind traveling trunks, their bodies, their voices, even their smell of human fatigue gone. We crowded into the salon once more. A single chandelier remained lit. The others dripped wax like tallow tears in their crystal mouths. The American twins held hands, repeating a nursery rhyme that braided nonsense vowels with professional precision. Each time the rhyme finished, June would twist her head toward the corridor and declare in her brother's voice, next course, as though mocking the engine's appetite. I recall vividly how the locomotive's nameplate, glimpsed through a frost-filmed window, seemed brighter than the chandelier. The letters TITAN 606 pulsed, faintly red, revealing themselves even through snow. I tried to calculate how the front section, lost beyond 2 empty spaces in the drifts, could transmit light through so many yards of winter wall, but no geometry satisfied. Lord Whitcomb adopted command. He armed himself with a trench knife retrieved from his war valise and ordered us to assemble in the last 3 carriages. We would hold the rear guard, he said, detach ourselves if need be, and let the damned Leviathan choke on its own hunger. Scurlock protested. The handbrakes might hold us, but without power we would freeze by morning. Whitcomb retorted that we were already dead men if we remained attached. His plan unraveled before implementation. At midnight we heard the handbrake ratchet itself in the guard's van. No human there to turn it. Steel shrieked. The floor lurched. In terror, we realized the machinery of the train could manipulate itself. The Leviathan did not need crewmen. We were parasites clinging to its vertebrae, and it would sooner shed us than perish. Madame Roussel advanced a theory between anxious sips of cognac. Metal, remembers, she said. They forged the boiler from cannons melted after Verdun. It drank 10,000 souls of war before it ever took a passenger. No one contradicted her, for the words carried a dreadful logic. If blood can baptize stone, why not steel? At 2 in the morning, I ventured alone into the baggage car to secure my research notes. They had become, absurdly, precious proof of a past where ritual belonged to the dead. As I unlatched my trunk, the corridor lights flickered and died. A breath smelling of coal dust brushed my ear. I swung my lantern round and glimpsed, at the far end of the carriage, a silhouette crouched upon the ceiling like a spider, limbs impossibly jointed, its skull sheathed in iron plates. In place of eyes glowed 2 furnace grates. While I stared, rivulets of black grease dripped from its mouth and sizzled on the floor. The shape flowed forward along the roof, metal limbs blending with shadow. I fled, dropping manuscripts that fluttered like scared birds behind me. When I regained the parlor, Whitcomb's knife jutting from his belt looked pitiful against that memory. I told them what I saw. Riley Parker, usually the skeptic, muttered, "A surrogate can slip its heart into any part of the train it wishes." Madame Roussel sobbed once, quietly, as though she had been expecting exactly that detail. At dawn, the world brightened enough to reveal our new mutilation. Only the dining saloon, the baggage car, and the guard's van remained. 4 carriages gone, with gaps in the snow as tidy as amputations, sealed by cautery. Skurlock, cheeks turned gray, proposed we abandon the cars and hike for the distant telegraph hut using sheets cut into snowshoes. He guessed 10 hours to reach a village marked on the timetable. The idea of leaving rails, however, produced visceral dread in each of us. The wilderness felt complicit, a blank parchment on which the engine could write new catastrophes. Yet I remember thinking that the frozen forest at least bore no giant fingerprint. We resolved to try at first light the following morning. Tonight, we said, our last inside would be guarded in shifts. It was not enough. During the second watch, Lord Whitcomb and June Parker manned the corridor while Skurlock, Madame Roussel, Riley, and I dozed near the stove. I awoke to Whitcomb's shout, "Off the floor!" Something thundered through the undercarriage, lifting planks like piano keys. The iron stove toppled. Sparks burst onto carpet. All lanterns went black simultaneously, as if snuffed by a subterranean lung. When my vision cleared, June Parker lay on the divan, staring upward with an unfocused smile, her voice imitating her brother's even in death. "Next course, next course." Her throat was not cut, but seemed shut by riveted metal, as though the engine had tried to solder her into silence. Raleigh hurled himself onto her body, shrieking in a voice of broken bellows. Whitcomb dragged him away, yet we all heard fresh clanking in the baggage car, followed by a sigh like steam finding release through human teeth. We bolted to the vestibule door just as the coupler ahead dissolved. No other word suffices. Into molten glow. A sheet of heat blasted us, though the air remained cold. The forward doorway shrank, as if digested, exposing haloed snow beyond. A section had become the new head of the train, somewhere invisible in front. The iron leviathan gorged on the coach it had claimed. Riley Parker charged the ice field with nothing but his sister's scarf around his fist. He vanished into white swirl within seconds. Whether he froze, fell in a fissure, or followed the engine's phantom tracks, we never learned. With his exit, we numbered 4. Morning revealed a miracle of violet sky. Sunlight pricked billions of ice crystals, each one stabbing the eye with miniature suns. The forest range looked serenely indifferent, as though the night's horrors had been a fever dream. But the rail line ahead ended in a rampart of sculpted snow, and somewhere behind that barricade, the Leviathan rested, or watched. We cut bed linens into makeshift gaiters, fastened luggage straps into harnesses, and stepped into the drifts. Trulock led, Whitcomb behind him, Madame Roussel next, and I last, carrying a valise of food tins. Each step plowed into the crust, crunching like bones. We kept the maroon wreck of the train behind us as a reference point, but within half an hour its silhouette blurred amid white hummocks. Wind rose, curling gusts off the ridge. The world became a single, colorless womb. I cannot give precise duration. Mans collapsed into a cyclogramma of glare. But at some point, Skurlock halted. Ahead, the snow bulged into an elongated mound whose sides bore parallel grooves, shiny as licked sugar. A half-buried marker post jutted nearby, charred black. Whitcomb brushed snow from the mound's apex and found brass paneling beneath, hot enough to melt his glove. We had discovered the missing carriages, fused together in a serpentine coil, ribs in windows flattened inward as though vacuumed empty. The structure was not random. It traced a curve of living vertebrae, section length precisely matching the coaches devoured. At its distant head, just visible through blowing flurries, rose the smokestack of the Titan 606, its funnel flexed like a cobra's hood. Madame Roussel groaned. Oily vapor seeped from her mouth, crystallizing on her lips. She pressed a hand to her chest and crumbled. The ground trembled, transmitting some subterranean heartbeat. I seized her wrist. Ice cold, but Whitcomb urged. We move. Shock would kill us if we lingered. We dragged her between us, circumventing the carcass coil. Yet each yard drawn past the structure made me feel we were circling, not a carcass, but an embryonic shell, something still knitting itself into maturity. Its surface bulged and settled, like muscles learning new gestures. Steam hissed from seams fracturing along wagon roofs. Unbidden, I thought of larval insects consuming their own discarded skins to sculpt wings. We reached the forest margin at dusk. Trees offered deceptive shelter, their branches sagging under icicle daggers. We found a gamekeeper's shack, padlocked but thin-walled. Whitcomb broke in, started a tinder fire. Madame Roussel lay murmuring delirious French. Scurlock rummaged for alcohol, discovered only lamp oil. He swallowed a mouthful anyway, perhaps mistaking it for brandy. Outside, twilight deepened, and with it came a rhythmic chug like distant machinery. But no smoke rose over the ridge where we had left the Leviathan. Instead, the sound came from every direction, echoing through trunks, vibrating the shack floor. Whitcomb peered through a shutter crack and stiffened. "Dear God," he whispered. "It's traveling beneath us." The quake tossed the cabin 3 inches off its footings. The ground on which the shack stood, frozen solid moments before, now heaved in undulant ripples. Snow collapsed into fissures that opened and sealed like gills. From one such fissure burst a jet of boiling steam, carrying with it a shriek of metal. The Titan 606 was tunneling up through earth and permafrost, dragging its necklace of crushed coaches behind like a rattlesnake's tail. Scurlock threw open the door, intending flight, but fire rushed in first. Coal spark mixed with scalding vapor. It washed over him. He did not scream long. Flesh blistered and peeled in ribbons. Whitcomb slammed the door, yet embers rained through chinks, catching the straw on which Madame Roussel lay. She roused enough to beg for water. There was none. The lamp oil heaved its foul perfume across flames, and the roof began to smoke. Whitcomb gripped my shoulder. "The cellar," he said, pointing at a trap door. It was barely wide enough for a child, but we hacked it open with a wood axe. I climbed first into a pit of root-cellar gloom, Whitcomb lowering Madame Roussel after me. Her skin steamed. She was silent now, her pulse fluttering like trapped moth wings. Whitcomb descended last, pulling the hatch shut as orange glow pooled above. We crouched among pickled beets and jars of pheasant stock while the shack burned. Through knotholes we saw beams collapse. Sparks hissed against snow at the pit's mouth, but smoke rose to the sky, not down into our shelter. We might have suffocated had the Leviathan not broken surface again, its breath displacing air upward. I felt it each time, a hot blast coursing through soil, rattling jars, stealing oxygen for its combustion. Honest Aug East. Neri said, "Earth sucks a bunch of oxygen." Ours blurred. Madame Roussel's heartbeat faded into the engine's cadence, until the two rhythms became indistinguishable. When she died, her final exhalation smelled of coal tar. Whitcomb touched her cheek, then wiped his fingers, leaving black smears across his metals. It was he who proposed the desperate act. If it feeds on the living, we will give it a corpse corrupted beyond taste. From his coat, he drew a small phial he had purchased sometime in Cairo. He said, "A preservative fluid of arsenic and exotic resins." We injected the mixture into Roussel's veins, using a turkey baster we found among the kitchen jars. Her flesh stiffened, skin glazing with a curious sheen. Just before dawn, a new silence fell, the engine pausing for dying embers above. Whitcomb shoved the trapdoor, shovel a hole. Wycombe shoved the trapdoor. Ash drifted down, but fire was out. Together we lifted Roussel's body to ground level, then followed. The landscape looked hammered flat. Trees uprooted, rails dislodged. Snow fused to glassy crusts of slag. 70 yards off squatted the Titan 606, half emerged, its buffers buried, its heart glowing between plates like meat behind ribs. Steam valves opened and closed in a slow pant. It seemed dormant, as though digesting. We dragged Roussel nearer, our breath plume mixing with the Leviathan's exhaust. 20 feet from the monstrous boiler we laid her in the snow. I retreated, but Whitcomb remained, planting his boot on her chest to press her into a shallow hollow, a sacrifice pinned. He saluted the locomotive, an absurd gesture, and backed away. For a minute nothing occurred. Then a panel on the boiler's flank unfolded like petals of scorched iron. A tendril, jointed like brake rods, extended, its tip a hungry nozzle. It brushed Roussel's cheek, paused as though tasting, then recoiled with metallic hiss. The tendril withdrew, the flower panel slammed shut, and the engine's running lights darkened from red to rust. Whitcomb exhaled a laugh, part triumph, part release. "Poisoned its palate," he said. If so, the victory cost him dearly. A tremor shot through the ground, buckling ice. A splinter of rail erupted upward like a spear, impaling his calf. He fell, trapped. I scrambled to aid him, but the Leviathan stirred. Wheels churned, though half-buried, grinding bedrock, shaking loose cascades of slag. I understood then it would tunnel away, leaving us marooned, or else explode upward, obliterating all. If Whitcomb remained skewered, neither of us would survive the shock. He met my stare, eyes filled with calm decision. "Run," he said. "Tell them what metal remembers." I did not argue. By tearing my gloves to ribbons, I freed his revolver and pressed it into his hand. He nodded. I fled toward the far ridge where dawn whitened the horizon. Behind me echoed a single gunshot. Whether aimed at the rail pinning him or at his own temple, I cannot say. The ground lurched. A roar like rupturing earth chased me. I turned once, saw the Titan 606 sink, coiltail deforming, plates folding inward as though retching. A bloom of black smoke fountained skyward, studded with embers that arced like diseased fireworks. Then silence. I found the telegraph hut by midday, half buried but intact. Inside, a generator coughed to life after 3 desperate cranks. I tapped an SOS until my fingers bled. Hours later, a plow train answered, a mundane, soot-smeared appliance that looked suddenly benign. Rescuers found no sign of the Titan or its chain of coaches, only a crater rimmed with crystallized carbon, snow fused into obsidian. They dismissed my tale as concussion delirium, citing avalanche, boiler explosion, wartime trauma. But sometimes when locomotives idle in city stations, I place my palm against their flank and feel heat pulsing like a secret heart. I trace the rivet seams, and in the pattern of raised metal, my skin recognizes the whirl of a monstrous fingerprint, patiently biding its time until the next winter night, the next banquet of souls.